Shalom and welcome to the special online conference in honor of the returning to the synagogues of Jewish communities around the world. This event is brought to you by the World Organization of Orthodox Communities and Synagogues and Arutz Sheva. Let's begin. And now here with us in the studio is Rabbi Doron Peretz, Chief Executive of World Mizrachi and Board Member of World Organization of Orthodox Communities and Synagogues. Shalom.
Shalom, Yoni. Wonderful to be with you.
Thank you for coming. So first of all, let's talk about the responsibility. It's a big word, but it's important that we look at this word and this role. Does the State of Israel, and then we'll talk about the communities, does the State of Israel have responsibility to Jewish communities around the world?
Mm-hmm. Firstly, I think the key word, as you said, is responsibility. I think the essence of leadership is responsibility. The people we ultimately lead are people we feel responsible for. First and foremost, ourselves. If we don't feel responsible for our own lives, it's difficult to lead your own life. If you feel responsibility and achrayut for others, then there's a sense of leadership. As the nation state of the Jewish people, if this was the state of Israel, which wasn't in essence a Jewish state, then maybe its first and foremost or only responsibility is for the Jews and non-Jews who are citizens of the state of Israel. Once it's the nation state of the Jewish people, and it's the Jewish state, it has to have a responsibility for Jews all around the world. I once heard, when I began my position at World Mizrachi, one of the people who interviewed me was Naftali Bennett, and he said a line then, and he said it so many times, and I always quote it because I think it's exactly right. I don't know if he made it up or heard it from somebody, but it says you've got to say something b'shem omro. Mm-hmm. He said for the first 70 years of the state of Israel, the state of Israel was the project of the Jewish people. He says perhaps for the next 70 years, the Jewish people need to be the project of the state of Israel.
The paradigm has changed.
I think it's changed. We all know when the state of Israel was founded in 1948, 6% of Jews around the world lived in Israel. Mm-hmm. Today it's almost 50%. But not only numerically is it 50%, it's the most significant, the largest and most significant Jewish community in the world. The amount of books that are produced, Jewish books in Hebrew and other languages as well, is unsurpassed in the Jewish world.
How do you translate that to, it's a great ideal and it sounds very good, how do you translate that to actions?
I think the leadership of this, not only the political leadership of the state of Israel, but anyone who has a leadership position in Israel, no matter what that position is, has to think, if I have a leadership position for an institution in Israel, how does that impact on Jews around the world? Mm-hmm. And I think this conference is a great idea. And it's exactly what the World Organization of Orthodox Synagogues and Communities it does, and which I'm part of, is if we're responsible for communities in Israel, we should be responsible for communities around the world. There's one Jewish people wherever they happen to be geographically. So I think there needs to be, first and foremost, a change in consciousness. When we think of whatever our tchum achrayut is, our area of experience is, how are we also thinking about these issues facing Jews and Jewish communities around the world?
Now, in terms of the communities themselves, it's also a responsibility. You feel that there's something that each and every community, each and every Jew in Israel can do?
Yeah. I'm not sure if each and every Jew in everything that they do, but
first of all, feel connected. That's important.
Absolutely. There is a principle we all know, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh, and that principle is every Jew should feel a sense of responsibility for each other. We know how much Chazal emphasized this point, that what happens to all of us is connected to the individual destinies of all of us, and therefore, in our thinking, there should be a sense of responsibility beyond geography. And I think that's been one of the outstanding qualities of the Jewish people, the sense of responsibility. We're a small people, and the sense of collective responsibility, I think, is the hallmark of Jewish existence. And Kal V'chomer ben Benoshel Kal V'chomer, when we live today, I come from Johannesburg, South Africa originally, there are so many people making aliyah from there and all over the world. And for the first time I'm hearing, Doron, over and above the ideology, it's just a great place to live. It's a first world country. The country works. It's unbelievable. People haven't visited here in 10 or 20 years cannot believe the difference. Meaning, when it always was Israel, the country that you need to, put your shekel, your dollar in the pushka for the Keren Kayemet, we still need support of Jews around the world. But something has changed. I think we live today in a privileged era with the state of Israel, and therefore a person of privilege has to think of everyone.
The days of COVID and also what we're seeing in terms of anti-Semitism really emphasize that
absolutely
it ain't simple.
One thing I can say for sure that I'm seeing from my vantage points, the last year and a half of COVID and anti-Semitism has shaken Jews and Jewish communities around the world on so many levels. Firstly, just the community. One, I think the major differences between communities in a Beit Knesset in Israel and opposed to many places in Chutz La'aretz is that Beit Knesset is often a place where you go and daven and then you go home. In Chutz La'aretz, it's the center of Jewish life. You know, one person I heard profoundly said, you know, in around the world in the diaspora, we don't often know the meaning of the Jewish people, the Jewish nation. That you feel when you're in Israel. You can't but feel Jewish nation and peoplehood. He said, but in Israel, we often don't feel the power of the Jewish community. A Beit Knesset in Chutz La'aretz, I mean, the Beit Knesset that I was part of in Rebbe, we had 7 minyanim on a Shabbat morning from every type of age group. It was the center of the community with hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of family involved. So the whole mirkam kehilati, the whole fabric of the community is often centralized around the shul. And the fact that Batei Knesset today have not had minyanim, it is devastating. Wow. It's devastating. I know that I live in Yad Binyamin, and I know for us, and I know the previous session was on, you know, the street minyanim. They've been very powerful, the street minyanim. It's allowed all of us an opportunity to connect with our neighbors and friends and people in our vicinity that we perhaps were not as connected to before. And even that's difficult to go back to the community. In Chutz La'aretz, if people do not, I know my fellow rabbis, and some you're going to be interviewing, if people don't return to the shul and aren't invested in the community, it has enormous implications for the future of those communities. And therefore, I think it's a massive thing. And I think we have a great role to play over here. And I think the second thing is anti-Semitism. For the first time, I'm hearing people who never would have spoken of, they spoke about visiting Israel and coming to Israel, but it's almost that there's a vulnerability at the moment, wow, both through COVID and both through COVID and through anti-Semitism. So there's a real place for us. We're also vulnerable. All Jews are vulnerable. The state of Israel, there's Iran, there's challenges we've seen with Hamas, but there's a sense of Israel is a privileged place.
So what is our goal? To bring them home to Israel, or to strengthen the communities? There's always that balance, right?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think all of life, the older I get, I see that all of life is striking a balance between things that seem to be contradictory. All of life is that. How do you balance between your communal role and your family and personal role? Which one's more important? They're both equally, but there's a stira, there's a contradiction. And should I be focused on inward or outward? You have to do both at the same time. And I think all salient areas of life, you have to do both. First and foremost, Ahavat Yisrael demands, I always say that Ahavat Yisrael does not end at the borders of Eretz Yisrael. We love all Jews, whether they live in Israel, whether they're planning to make Aliyah, whether they're observant or non-observant. We love all Jews because there's a principle called Ahavat Yisrael, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh. And that principle demands of us to have a deep sense of collective, in use of Soloveitchik's words, of collective fate and destiny for all Jews wherever they are, independent of geography, independent of station in life. At the same time, though, as Zionist Jews and as a religious Zionist Jew who believes in the centrality of Torah and Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah of having the centrality of the Jewish people focused in Israel, there has to be a viewpoint which sees Eretz Yisrael and the state of Israel as a focal point of Jewish destiny. So to say that I think there's two extremes in my opinion, which are one-sided. A person who comes along and says, our role is only to make Jews make Aliyah. It's not Ahavat Yisrael for L'Shem Ahavat Yisrael, it's Ahavat Eretz Yisrael. We're only involved in making Jews make Aliyah, otherwise we're not involved. I think lacks a sense of Ahavat Yisrael. And I think people who say, there's lots of Jewish centers around the world, and we legitimize all of those centers is compromising the centrality of Israel in Jewish and Zionist identity. So I think you can say the Jewish people's center, and ideally according to the Torah, has to be in Israel. There's a mitzvah to live here both collectively and individually, but at the same time, there's also a principle of Ahavat Yisrael, which is independent of that. And I think we have to have it both ways.
Okay, Rabbi Doron Peretz, Chief Executive of World Mizrahi, Board Member of World Organization of Orthodox Communities and Synagogues. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you very much, Yoni. And I want to say a big יישר כוח to our board, David Benay, and all the members of the World Organization of Orthodox Communities and Synagogues, Rabbi Shmuel Slotki, our director, for initiating such a conference and such a discussion, because ultimately there is the need for world organizations which bring together in all spheres of influence, and in this case communities and shuls, synagogues, those in Israel, those around the world, feeling ke'ish echad b'lev echad, and a big יישר כוח and an honor to be part of it.
And now for our special panel on maintaining the wholeness of the community until returning to the synagogues. Shalom to Rabbi Shalom Axelrod, Rabbi of the Young Israel of Wadmer Community.
Shalom. Shalom, Yoni.
And shalom to Rabbi Yaron Engelmeyer, Chief Rabbi of the Jewish Community in Vienna.
Shalom, Yoni.
So first of all, what's the current coronavirus status by you, Rabbi Axelrod?
Okay, so essentially, in a very similar way to what's going on in Israel, many of our members, of our community members, over 95% are vaccinated. And because of that reality, it's allowed us pretty much a full return to shul. We still are offering outdoor minyanim or areas within the synagogue that people wear masks or we'll call mask only versus mask optional. But in terms of all the shiurim, all the in-person, pretty much sitting regularly with the exception of just non-potted, have a space between them. Our Beit Knesset, Baruch Hashem, is quite full. All our minyanim are up and running, and we pretty much are in a regular mode.
And by you in Vienna, Rabbi Engelmeyer?
Yeah, it took a little while, a little delay if you compare to Israel, but by now the vaccination is going on. It's bringing a very different status, and just this week they released some of the rules. We are now allowed to welcome much more people in the synagogues. We were all the time inside, but sometimes it was closed or just very little people allowed to come, very few. And by now we can have much more, and the revival is going on.
So let's go back to the beginning, so to say. Tell us, please, Rabbi Axelrod, about the meaning and significance for your community members to have the synagogues closed down.
Yes, I would say, one of the unique aspects, I'm not so familiar with the European model, so we'll leave that for Rabbi Engelmeyer. But the American model of what the synagogue means to an average community member is very expansive in the sense that the shul is a center of Jewish life in America. In the Orthodox community, a shul is not just a place that a person attends for minyan, but is rather so much more in the role that it plays with regards to the entire mishpacha, whether it's a youth department, whether it's the shiurim, the relationship with the rabbanim. It's a much deeper, I think, relationship that exists between the shul and the community member. And so two things occurred during Corona. One is there was a great level of disconnect from the fact that people could no longer be in shul. Shul is so much a part of a person's life and what shul means for a person, and not having that experience on a daily, weekly basis was very jarring for people, especially in the very beginning, especially the fact that it was straight up into the Chagim. In other words, this whole happened straight into Pesach, which is the time that a person is very involved in going to the synagogue. The second thing that I would mention is that because of that relationship that exists between an individual in the community and the shul and what the shul represents, we had to quickly pivot to become an organization of almost a social, spiritual welfare organization in terms of servicing the needs, not only spiritually by pivoting to Zoom Beit Medrash learning or Zoom davening, so that they could feel that spiritual connection and the relationship with the rabbi that they couldn't directly talk to and hear a shir from, but via Zoom. And likewise, in terms of all the services, from getting and providing them with matzot for the Chag right away, to all the different aspects of meals, of families that were in quarantine. Our community was very much impacted by the virus in the beginning. We lost shul members. There were families sitting shiva. There were families not just tens, hundreds of families in quarantine over the first few weeks. How are they getting their food? How are they picking up their pharmaceutical things? We didn't have, in Israel, you saw those pictures of Bnei Brak, and the Tzava came in and they were delivering the food and they were helping the elderly and they were being involved in it. There's no Tzava here. So the shul had to transition to provide those services, and Baruch Hashem, we were able to.
And how did you experience the synagogue lockdown in Vienna, Rabbi Engelmeyer?
Well, I haven't been in Vienna when it began to be closed because we came here just last summer, but it was a special, difficult time for the community because as Rabbi Axelrod pointed out, outside of Israel, the community is the heart of the Jewish life, and especially the synagogue, and everything is going on and connecting. And if this connection can't be physical, so it's very hard to have a bridge and to get to people, to help everyone and to stay connected. And people love to meet and to come back. And in the synagogue, you see how happy people are to come, to join again. And it is really sort of revival and very refreshing feeling for the whole community.
So, Rabbi Axelrod, what experiences and stories will you take with you from this year?
Yeah, it's there are so many. There are quite a number of stories, but I think just I myself personally haven't really had moments to reflect. It's been an ongoing effort, nonstop by all the rabbanim. I think in all the shuls. So they're just those images of unfortunately, communities coming together, the outdoor minyanim. I mean, the being in frigid weather. We were able to maintain tefillah b'tzibur 3 times a day, but throughout the winter, people were davening out. Hundreds of men were davening outdoors because they felt comfortable. We were already indoors at an earlier point, but many people did not feel comfortable coming indoors. We had over 100 shul volunteers step forward to produce a Yom Noram. We normally see close to 2,500 people for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We had over 1,350 this past year in a socially distant way that required 11 different minyanim on 3 different campuses with 6 feet spacing. 100 people had to volunteer to pull that off. That was unbelievable. Think about all the Sefer Torahs that needed to be rolled, all the chazanim, all the people davening for the Amid, all the Gabaim. It was unbelievable.
So you also feel that there's a lot that we should be taking with us from these days of the pandemic?
I think absolutely. I think there's so many. I think if that we were to go through an experience of COVID and not take lessons from it, all different types of lessons, the personal lessons of what reflecting on what family means and what relationships mean, to the communal lessons of maybe we don't have to spend expenditures on the smachot of bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah and even weddings. They're even now still subdued. They're not as elaborate as they were in the past. Or just having the fact that by being spaced out at 6 feet with a mask on, people finally during Kriyat HaTorah were looking in a chumash. People who never looked in a chumash. People who never came to a tefillah b'tzibur for shacharit. All those people in their outdoor minyan had to show up in order that there should be a minyan. So they did come earlier. And so there's so many positives that I think need to come out. And hopefully the community will hold on to. And I think it will be a tremendous loss if we don't.
Rabbi Engelmeyer, what do you want to learn from these days of COVID?
Yeah, first of all, to appreciate what we think it's normal. It's normal to meet each other, to get together, to have our family together. And these things weren't appreciated as much as they are now. And we should really save these feelings and take it with us. Besides that, from the community level, there was a big impact, a big powerful outreach to everyone, to get everyone to get to know how is everyone feeling, who needs what, financial help, social help, psychological help, to be together with everyone. There was an outreach by Zoom online. We have now our tefillot also over Facebook, and we have shulim online on Zoom, and thoughts for Shabbat are sent out by YouTube and so on. And we figure out that much more people are connected in that way. And probably we're going to keep that and combine. So we're going to hopefully have all the people back who want to come back and to meet again. But on the other side, also to reach everyone at home. And we have a lot of people sitting anywhere in the country, in Austria, who are looking for shiurim, for Jewish learning, for being participate, and we learned it through that period that it is possible to reach these people as well.
Yeah, today one could come to synagogue, so to speak, with the click of a button in the Zoom era.
Yeah, it's not the same, and we of course we stress that out and say whoever can come, it's much better from halachical point of view, and also physical and the meaningful. But a lot of people can't, or they are not able to. They're too far away living, and the combination gives them also connection and identification with a Jewish life in the daily life.
So Rabbi Axelrod, is there a feeling that despite everything, you were able to strengthen the connection of the members of the community to the community in this period?
I think at least from my personal experience, is that I think because our shul and many other shuls who did the same were there for people during this pandemic in a way that no one ever could have imagined. Because of that, the relationship is more profound. People generally feel that their connection got even stronger because of first of all, I think it was two things. I think it became, distance makes the heart grow fonder. So the fact that everyone was away so long, and it felt so long because it was days that stretched into weeks, that stretched into months. And then even when we were back, it was just so distant and so cold. And so now that people are returning in a normal way, even just like this past week, it was just spontaneous, but like people started to shake hands again. Many people felt comfortable just, coming, and, everyone said, we're good with this. And so I think that the community is stronger. I think the shuls are going to be stronger. Obviously there are some challenges, but Mitzvah Hashem, I have confidence, hopefully, that we will emerge from this even greater than we were before.
Rabbi Engelmeyer?
Yeah, I pretty much want to join what Rabbi Axelrod said. The relationships became deeper, stronger. The sense and feeling of responsibility for each other is much stronger, and hopefully we'll take that with us.
Rabbi Shalom Axelrod, Rabbi of the Young Israel of Woodmere Community, and Rabbi Yaron Engelmeyer, Chief Rabbi of the Jewish Community in Vienna. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yoni. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
And now it's time to connect communities. Shalom to Noah Lewis, Director of the Connecting Communities Project.
שלום יוני.
So tell us about this amazing initiative.
הארגון העולמי של בתי הכנסת והקהילות האורתודוקסיות, together with איגוד רבני קהילות, עשה לך רב ברקאי, they are four roof organization for rabbis in Israel, together with Gesher and the Jewish Agency, started this initiative of connecting communities in Israel with communities overseas.
What's the defined goal?
To connect, to create relationship, to create warm, and that people will know each other, more awareness of Israeli people to the communities overseas and both sides, to create a two-ways relationship of warmness, care for each other, people that will have, can pick up the phone and call for a happy birthday or help each other for whatever needed.
And now joining us are two rabbis that are participating in the project. Shalom to Rabbi Jolt Bala, Community Rabbi of Leipzig, Germany, and Rabbi Hillel Meisels, Rabbi of the Ohel Ephraim Community in Ariel, two communities which connected through this project.
Shalom V'chab. Hi.
Hi, shalom. Welcome, everybody.
So, Rabbi Bala, what's the significance of this connection?
I think one of the most beautiful parts of connecting to the community of Ariel is the same diversity that we have in our community. It's we in Germany, as you might know, most of the communities comprise of a lot of Russian-speaking Jews who arrived to Germany in the last 20 years from the former Soviet Union. So just like Ariel, we have Russian speakers. We also have the young generation who are speaking English. And we have a lot of people who really want to connect to Israel and to communities in Israel. And that's It's really a great experience to strengthen this idea that we are not a separate community. Today, everybody's promoting the idea of a global village. And I think it's really, really nice. And therefore, our small community, again, for numbers, we are speaking about 1,250 Jews here in Leipzig. It's great to connect to a community. First of all, Israel is very diverse as well, but it's always amazing thing to find one community that is really one small community. Ohel Ephraim, I'm sure Rabbi Hillel will speak more about that, but it's just the ideal partner, I believe, in this partnership.
And Rabbi Meisels, how do you explain the importance of this project to your community in Israel?
That's a very good point. Because, before we had our meeting with the Rav Zholt's community in Leipzig, there was a meeting of all the different rabbis and communities who are interested in this. And a lot of them actually needed to be convinced why it's important. Whereas in our shul, in our community, first of all, we have a number of olim, whether it's from the Soviet Union, from America. I'm from South Africa originally. So first of all, there is that awareness of the importance. But secondly, even amongst the native-born Israelis, they were very interested, very excited about making the connection. I think also when they heard it was Germany, it also gave them an extra push based on the Germany in the World War II. But there was a lot of positive feedback and positive interest in creating these connections. And as one person put it when we had our meeting, Rabbi Zholt remembers probably, one person said, you hear a lot about on the news, but here we're real people who live here. And we can tell you actually what's happening on a day-to-day basis and show you how we're actually living our lives here. So it was very, very well received and very excited to be part of this connection.
So Rabbi Bella, how's it going so far?
So we are at the beginning of this process. At the same time, it's really nice. First of all, I'm really, really grateful to be connected to some of incredible initiatives in Israel, bringing rabbis together. The Sochnut and the JDC are doing incredible work in this area to strengthen the connection between rabbis, not just between Israel and the diaspora, but within Israel itself. And I was very, very glad to be connected through some of these initiatives. And it took us a little time to sit down together with Rebbe and Meisels and my wife, and Mrs. Noah Lewis from the JDC to speak about how we should formulate this program. How should we kick off? And we managed to pull through a meeting that was really, really successful. I think it's one of the most important things is no strings attached. So people will feel that they are free. This is a conversation. We just want to get to know each other. And already at the first meeting, there were some ideas that, I don't know, one of the wonderful people from Ohel Ephraim, a lady who's an artist, says, I want to connect artists. So straight away, I have a daughter who has very good artistic skills. Great. I want her to have more Jewish input. Fantastic connection. So then another young man said, I want to have somebody, a Chabru, so I want to learn better Hebrew. And somebody in the Ariel community says, I would love to learn maybe a little bit more German. So, I think these are the connections that are the most valuable, and this is going to be a great outcome. And this is where we are right now.
You're a rabbi, you teach Torah and Judaism to your community, but why is this project specifically so important? What's the extra value?
I think the answer is very, very simple. Sometimes you have to bring certain pictures that are abstract in your mind to actually something that you can grab with your hands. Israel, the beauty of land of Israel, the Jewish community Israel, for people who do not have a connection, it's much more an abstract image, maybe something connected to our religion. And obviously it's connected to our religion, but I think it's a great thing to bring it down to the level. No, you have to know this is existing. It's going on. We have to find a connection there. So I think this is a simple answer to that, exactly like Rav Meisel says. There is something that you can relate to, not just an abstract image in your mind.
Rabbi Meisels, tell us about the feeling of responsibility. Suddenly your community members understand that they have what to give to our brothers and sisters around the world.
I think you said it all. I think that's definitely part of it. I think it's first of all, you're right. It's definitely about giving. And I think the more the people in our community feel they're giving, the more they're also connected to our community and to Am Yisrael. I think there's something also for our community to gain in terms of, and I spoke about portraying Israel to the diaspora. I think it's important for people in our shul to understand, our community to understand what's going on outside of Israel, to understand the challenges, to understand, that we're all one. And sometimes we get caught up in our own politics and who's going to be in the government. And we have to realize how much we affect Chutz La'aretz and how much Chutz La'aretz is part of us as well. Rabbi Bala gave a nice example when we spoke about the Gemara, which you have a person with two heads. How do you know if it's one person with two heads or two people with a joint body? The Gemara says, you pour boiling water on the one and see if the other one shouts, the other one cries. And I think that's what we're trying to create over here, is for both heads to realize there's another head here and how we work together.
And Noah, as we see here, and as you mentioned in the beginning, it's both ways. It's not just the Israeli community telling the community abroad about Israel, and it's not just the community abroad saying to the guys in Israel, way to go. It's both ways, it's mutual.
Yes, we want the relationship to be two-ways relationship, like brothers, picking up the phone, calling, meeting, discussing, caring about each other. If there is a chas v'shalom anti-Semitic attack in Europe, so that people in Israel should just pick up the phone and hear, and in both ways to have just normal relationship, like a family.
Practically speaking, how is it done? What is the idea? How is this put together?
Okay, so the first stage is recruiting the rabbis. We recruit rabbis in Israel. We recruit rabbis overseas. We're also using the infrastructure that we have from the Jewish Agency. They have two programs of school twins and together program that connect communities. So we're joining that as well. We look for the rabbis, we interview them, we build a database, we see what they need. The second stage is the match stage. We do the shidduch. We find the matching communities, and then we take the rabbis together with the leadership, and we set them up.
You mentioned a shidduch. Is it important to see that they fit each other?
So it's interesting because sometimes we don't want them to fit each other so much. We want in some ways. So
it'll be more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if I will take an American that just made Aliyah and connecting with his community back home in the States, it's not the issue. I want to find someone in the kibbutz, in Emek Bet Shean, that doesn't have family or anyone overseas, and be connected to someone in upstate New York, for example.
Now, in these days, after we're hopefully finishing, of course, the days of Corona, but we're still connected to Zoom, basically you're using these technologies and keeping them going.
Yeah, which is fantastic. I don't know if we could think about it in that way before. So Zoom is wonderful. There's many programs you can do via Zoom. I mean, you can do games, you can do panels, you can do learning session, you can split two rooms. People can have face-to-face interaction and discussion. The magic that we just, maybe you felt a little bit with Rabbi Bala and Rav Hillel together was very special when they connected together. You could see the people interested and asking questions, and we set a meeting for 45 minutes and they stayed for like an hour and a half to discuss and learn and explore and represent their own community. So the Zoom is not bad.
Now, Rabbi Bala, this is all happening in wake of COVID-19. What can you tell us about the situation by you? Are you also returning to the synagogues?
We're getting slowly back to synagogues. We are a little bit slower than Israel, and we are very, very happy. And in a very positive way, we're looking at our brothers and sisters in Israel that life is going back slowly to normal, and this is giving us a great hope. Now the numbers are also getting much, much better in Germany because of the vaccinations, and let's hope that this is going to continue. And I hope that certain Zoom things and certain online events will remain, and those will be looked upon much more with enthusiasm, and to see not everything is online, but whatever is remaining online, it's something inspiring and it's important, and I hope this will be one of those things.
I think one of the brachas of Corona is Zoom. I think that's actually what allowed us to have this whole meeting. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure how we would have done it. So that's definitely a big plus. Having said that, almost everyone in Ohel Ephraim echoed the message. We're waiting for you to come here. We want to meet you all in person here in Israel, and looking forward.
We are looking forward to it as well.
No, we're seeing now the rabbis talking together as part of our interview, and they of course talk through your project, but it's also about the members of the communities themselves, right?
Yeah, so the project actually has 3 layers. First, we connect a community to a community. Then we go through the leadership. We take the leaders from each community, the rabbis, and we connect them. And they learn to know each other and work together and plan the programs that will suit them. And then we go to the real stuff, to the people that in the shetach, that they actually connecting on the field. The people on the field, they're actually connecting and creating those relationships.
How's it feel being part of this project?
Blessing. I feel very, I feel like to be part of something that's a connection of people. It's very special.
Rabbi Jolt Bala, Community Rabbi of Leipzig, Germany, and Rabbi Hillel Meisels, Rabbi of the Ohel Ephraim community in Ariel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shalom, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Noah Lewis, Director of the Connecting Communities Project. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you, Yoni.
Thank you for joining us for this special online conference in honor of the returning to the synagogues of Jewish communities around the world, brought to you by the World Organization of Orthodox Communities and Synagogues and the Arutz Sheva. Shalom from Jerusalem.